Hello, this is Tony Mateos from the LAOS Foundation. In this video, I'll demo the latest work on the BRC 721 protocol that enables the scaling of NFT creation and management on Bitcoin. I'll be playing two main roles in the demo, collection owner and user. I'll be using terminals with black background for actions performed by the collection owner, for example, the owner of a game, and in cinnamon background for actions performed by the user, for example, a gamer in that game. To set up the collection, we need to perform one action on LAOS and then one on Bitcoin. First, we need to create a smart contract that will be responsible for minting on LAOS via the standard EVM tooling. In this case, I'm using a script that comes from the LAOS examples repository for convenience. When the transaction is confirmed, I'll write down the corresponding contract address. Once we have it, we need to create a BRC 721 collection on Bitcoin that points to that address. This is the command line that helps you send this transaction to the Bitcoin network. It's quite explicit. We'll wait for the transactions to go through several confirmations on Bitcoin. In the meantime, we can use the BRC 721 indexer that is aware of both Bitcoin and LAOS for all created collections and NFTs. For the time being, ours, which pointed to an address ending in 260, is not present yet. We need to wait for confirmations. After the confirmations arrive, the parser has finally found and processed the transaction, which was the first one in this block, as confirmed by querying the REST endpoint that it exposes. Note the unique collection ID that's being assigned, 9350981442. This corresponds to the Bitcoin block and transaction index in that block where the transaction was accepted. The BRC 721 indexer now knows about the presence of this collection, and it correctly returns that it contains no NFTs. Okay, next phase. Let's create a couple of NFTs. The protocol works as follows. When the collection is created on Bitcoin, every possible address owns 2 to the 96 slots. Think of them as addresses that initially contain nothing. They point to places that contain nothing, and where NFTs can later be minted by simply filling what those addresses contain. It is the responsibility of the collection creator to fill those slots and hence mint NFTs. We will create two assets for Bob by filling two such slots on LAOS. So imagine Bob is playing the game. He needs to inform the game owner about the address where he would like those assets to be minted. Here's Bob initializing a Bitcoin wallet with a mnemonic of his choice. All addresses on that wallet have both a Bitcoin format and an Ethereum or EVM format with 160 bits, according to the published BRC 721 protocol that transforms the former into the latter. Bob informs the game owner about the EVM address. The game owner, using again a script from the LAOS examples repository, mints to such recipient. In this case, the script fills a random slot, this one starting with 259. The BRC 721 indexer picks this new mint immediately. Let's mint a second NFT to the same owner by choosing a different random slot. Okay, now that Bob has two NFTs, he'd like to trade the first one. Every ownership-related transaction happens on Bitcoin, permissionlessly. It's not the responsibility of the game owner to do anything here related to trading. The first step for Bob is to register the NFT in a UTXO. The owner of that UTXO will obviously be the owner of the NFT that it contains. Under the hood, the registered ownership transaction will use an input owned by Bob to prove that no one else but Bob is actually doing this, and then use the first output of the UTXO to place an op return with the right syntax specifying what this transaction is doing. And the registered NFTs will be packed inside output 1. Finally, output 2 will be used for change as usual. Here are the steps. First, Bob must have a minimal balance to pay for this transaction. Here we see that he has some amount. He sets up the collection ID and the initial owner of the NFT, which is himself, and the slot. And he'll have to wait for the transaction to confirm. After that, when we query about the asset, we'll see that the owner is now the owner of that UTXO, not the initial owner any longer. Now Bob would like to trade the asset, send it to Alice, in exchange potentially of some Bitcoin. That would be a standard trade. Here we'll only cover the free sending, or if you want, sending a gift. The anatomy of the process is really, really simple. Bob just sends the UTXO that contained the NFT to an address owned by Alice. So here's Bob querying about the assets he has registered so far. He'll send it from his first address to the second one. Imagine Alice owned the second one. It's going to be simpler to have everything on the same wallet. To prepare the transaction, he needs to use the transaction ID and output that identifies the UTXO that contains the NFT, and build the sent asset transaction accordingly. We wait until it's confirmed. And now the query will return the new owner, Alice. It's all as expected. The new UTXO is now located in this new transaction ID at its first output. Finally, let's discuss the mixed transaction, which is useful to repackage NFTs into UTXOs so that they can be later sold in bulk or separately as desired. In this example, we'll first create and register 10 NFTs in one single UTXO. We will then split those into 3 separate UTXO. The first one will contain the first NFT, the second will contain the next 4, and the third one will contain the remaining 5. Here's the game owner minting 10 assets to Bob, in this case, with consecutives of slot numbers. Note that the BRC71 indexer will now return 10 extra assets. From 12, we will have to go to 22. Here's now Bob registering the 10 of them in one single UTXO. Note the syntax that specifies all slots from 0 to 9 inclusive. And here Bob addresses. We'll use the first 3 to receive the split of the 10 assets. And here's the syntax. Note that we specify the UTXO that contains the NFTs via its transaction input and output index again. Note how we inserted the first address to contain the first NFT in the input UTXO, the second address to contain the next 4 NFTs in the input UTXO, and the third address to contain the remaining NFTs in the input UTXO. Okay, let's wait for some confirmations, and now query about the assets owned by Bob's wallet. We look at the assets in the mixed transaction. Okay, so here's output 3 containing the range 5 to 9. Here's output 1 containing the first one. And output 2 containing the range 1 to 4, as expected. So finally, let's inquire a bit about a particular NFT. For example, this one starting with an ID that starts with 31, and check who the owner is in the BRC71 indexer. it should be the owner of this UTXO, which happens to end with VA. Correct, here we have it. Let's now ask about the attributes of this NFT. Okay, it's a LAOS coin with lime color. Let's check the image. Here we have it too. Okay, thank you for your attention and goodbye.